How you doing, Gare?
Good, mate, and yourself?
Good. I talked to my postal guy. Your box went out this week. I sent it FedEx.
Oh, that's good. Thanks very much for that.
So,
That'll change. That may change the way I build these buildings.
oh my God, I'm excited just for you to see actual physical product in a box that isn't like soup sticks or chopsticks. Or...
These things.
So, I was thinking about format for us.
Yep.
I want to do something to keep people engaged.
Yep.
And I think when I watched about 10 minutes of last week's, and I'm boring as shit. And so, like, I don't know. I think each week maybe we could like do a little 15-minute mini class on something like maybe, for example, working how to do tar paper roofs one week, how to
Yep.
put how do you know what I'm saying? Just one little thing for the modeler that's already a modeler.
Yes.
And then because if there was a way, one of the things that it's fascinating to me, like I'll watch. I've taken some of the guys that you've mentioned on YouTube and went and watched their video, and people can talk. I'm as enamored with the teacher as I am with the content. When they're talking about introductory level stuff, I'm kind of learned some new things that I didn't know, because we all get into modeling in our own way, and it's almost like computer programming or learning. I'll give you an example. I had an engineer when I had 38 Studios. I had an engineer that ran Windows 100% from the keyboard. Never used his mouse. I've never navigated Windows one time with my keyboard. I've always used my mouse. Yeah. And so there are things like you're talking about. I thought last week one of the cool things was our approach to making a rust-covered object.
Yeah.
I use a very traditional store-bought method. You do it differently, and I think that people learn. But I think that there's something for us from a content perspective where we can focus, because one of our problems is going to always be that you and I will get talking about stuff because we're both have very common interests when it comes to modeling. Yeah. And I think a lot. I don't know, how you feel, but I always feel like a lot of times someone will wander off and start talking about things that really didn't pertain to the stream I was watching.
Yep.
So I think maybe next week or whatever we should start trying to do like a very specific task.
And
teach us skill.
I think if we can sort of keep it sort of building along on this build that we're doing, it'll help it further, because like it's taken us sort of 2 weeks to get to this stage, which is the garage.
Right.
And I think both of us have got the garage finished. Today, one of the things I intended to talk about is just setting up the base for the diorama, and also it was one of the questions I had for you. What do you want to do next? Do you want to scratch build the multi-roof building, or just the simpler four-sided house?
Well, so here's where I'm at. I'm in the middle. I'm at the beginning of a move, and so one of the things that I've started to do is to ease up on the end stages of a build, because I'm not going to detail and mount dioramas right now.
Yep.
Because I'm moving.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean I can't be a part of any aspect of a build, but I generally think it's a lot more. Well, I don't know. I'm not a viewer, so I wouldn't know this, but I think it's more interesting to viewers getting to watch it happen in real time and learning by seeing a physical object being built, or But I think it would be cool if everybody came away from each week understanding a new skill.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I'm thinking of doing with the if you remember the photo of those houses across the street, they're actually, one of them is a brick home, and one of them is a clapboard home on top of a brick first story. And I was thinking about how to do that. Now, obviously, if I had availability of materials, I could use just brick, like a brick sheet. But then I thought about it. It's if you look at the photos, one of the things I like to do is try and model as accurately as I can. And if you look at the photos of those houses in the diorama, the brick is actually, I wouldn't say it's stucco, but back in the 30s, obviously they didn't pull the mortar between the bricks, and they virtually flushed the brick and then painted it. And then over time it's weathered, and the one that I was going to model has got part of the brick showing through. Now, when you talk about watching videos, Doug Foscale has his videos, and his is the kit that we're building. He has a very good video that I'd recommend anyone who wants to do this have a look at first, and it's about building a concrete water front wall, like a the how do you describe it? Just the concrete wall on a waterfront. And what he does is he casts hydrocal plaster. So I think we can take that to the next level, and I'm going to give it a try. I've ordered some dental casting plaster, and that should be here this week. And I've drawn up in Illustrator the building with all the bricks. Now we can, what I think, because one of the problems of trying to scribe HO bricks into plaster is the fact that they're only like a millimetre apart, so it's very, very fine. And it's the measuring that just kills you. Scribing it's quite easy. But your method of transferring a sign from in reverse onto a building, I think can be replicated onto the plaster.
Right.
So what we'll do is probably use that gesso, cast the square block, and then cut out, and I've figured out a way on that web page of ours, or mine, that you can, I'm putting PDF files, so anyone who's interested can download the PDF and then they can print it themselves. This sheet that I used, which is the signage for the garage, I'll put on there. Did you notice that?
Oh, nice.
So, Schilling and Sons. Now, I've used your method but changed it. Let me just try and steady that.
It's too dark.
Oh, hang on, let me turn the light on. It might be easier.
There you go.
No, that's going to be too. Hang on.
Back away. There you keep back away. Light. Keep going. There you go. Right there.
Okay, so can you see the Schilling and Sons coal merchants and general carriers is on the side, and I've done that using your method, but using a matte varnish, which is a clear.
Right.
So instead of having the white showing through, you've got the timber showing through. So we can do something similar to that, where we cast the side walls for the bottom floor in brick, which will be plaster, then put the print down over the top of it, and then it's just a matter of lining a ruler up and scribing the bricks. And because it's the way it is, you only have to do a small section of bricks, because you're sort of representing a flat wall and and partially worn brick.
Right.
And then Doug has a method where he puts in just a little bit of dirt into the bottom of the mold when he molds it, and then when you pull the plaster out, you can scrape that dirt off, and it gives you a rough texture. So I'd imagine, I'll experiment with it, but I think if we put a bit of dirt along the bottom of the wall and then pull that out, what it'll look like once you've scribed the bricks is that there's been erosion at the bottom, which is where exactly on the wall you'd have the erosion. I think it could be a good effect. And again, we're sort of developing new techniques, because there's enough YouTubers around that are doing basic modeling, but I think it's always about taking that next step. So I'd encourage anyone who wants to have a look. If I think at the very start of the live chat here, I put up a post that I've started. There's a description on the webpage about the actual diorama and what you and I are doing. And then I've put an extra page that you can click through to, which is just the progress of the build. So I've thrown up some photos of the garage, and I've tried as close as possible to model that garage exactly to the proportions that's in that photo.
Right.
Which is what we're trying to do. But some of the things I haven't done to this yet, the paintwork, like on the rusted roof, it's still quite bright. Let me see if I can just get another light up.
It's bright.
Well, the colour is quite vivid, the rust. And what I'll be doing is using some ink stains and some pastel chalks just to knock that colour down. But I've already got a bit of junk on there. I wound up a couple of like car springs and there's bits of board, and there's an old Texaco sign that's been thrown on the roof that's patching up a hole. So that's that sort of detail there. And obviously on this feed, it's not as easy to see. Also, the door's got the boards. I zoomed in on that photo. I actually thought initially it was a window, but it's not. It's a door, and the bottoms of it are boarded up because what we'll be building, I imagine, is like a pen off the side, and it's a chicken pen. It's a chicken coop.
Oh, okay.
So
nice.
So again, it's all these little details. You can spend literally 6 months building just this one diorama if we wanted to.
Oh yeah.
So it's all about sort of the finesse of how far we wanted to go. I mentioned the other night I found a new product that I now absolutely love, and I haven't got it here. Yeah, I have. This. I'm not sure whether it's available in the US, but matches, as in striker light matches, they come in. The box is a paper covered board, and it's literally, I'd say, about 0.25 of a mil thick, which as a cheap resource, there it is, like
okay.
That's the actual a piece of the box that the matches came in. And then what I used that for was these doors on the front of the building.
Oh, really?
Well, it meant that they're so fine. If you there, you can see they're a trifold door, and I've got them at about scale thickness. But the thing I found with the wood that they're using to make matchboxes, I don't know why. They're probably coming from India or somewhere, but it's extremely stable. Wendy says the Philippines. But yeah, the wood is extremely stable. So if you look at the close-up photos that I took of it, when you get right down up to it, you can actually see the wood grain in the timber, and it looks real. And that's what I'll be using to scratch build the outhouse, so that you've got all of that good rough timber grain. The other stuff.
What kind of texture does it have?
Well, it's wood.
I mean,
sorry.
No, I was just saying sometimes at that scale, it's hard to translate wood texture, even on.
That's why I like it. It's a really, really fine grain. Wow, I'm not sure what sort of timber it is that they're using, but it's extremely fine grain. If you look at, again, I'd say to anyone, if they want, go back and have a look at the photos on the website that I took last night after I finished it. When you go really close to it, you'd swear that it's an old piece of antique wood when it's painted up, and it come up really good.
Oh, good.
So the next thing I've got to do to this, that I was going to talk about briefly this morning, is just all of the structure is now built. It's finished virtually. A funny story. I tried to get historically accurate. I found a photo of a pin-up calendar for January 1939, which is exactly the year that photo was taken, the year and month. And I'll put it inside. It's hanging on the wall in the garage, but you can actually see it if you view through the window. The problem is, I'm going to need to buy your magnifiers, I think, because I took a photo of it and it was upside down. It's so damn small. When you get in for the photograph, you can actually see the pin-up girl on the calendar, and you can see the dates and all that stuff. And I just thought because it was predominantly white on the bottom, oh, that's the calendar, so I've stuck it on the wall. And then I took the photo and found out, oh no, that was the sky. So the girl's hanging upside down. So I'll just stick another one over the top of it. It's all good fun. But yeah, so the only thing I have to do to this now is pastel chalks. So I'll weather down the side of the building. Because it's a steel roof, I'll just pull some burnt sienna, just in some stripes down the side on the wood to stain that. The Rinso sign, I found that's again a sign that dates the building. I just thought it was comical to have, we're building this thing where she's hanging out the laundry. So they've got a metal sign on the side of the building with Rinso, and it actually says on the bottom, save coal. I don't know why it was save coal if you use Rinso. And the whole thing about this CM Schilling and Sons coal merchants, again, in the photo, there's they've got like a stack of coal beside the chicken pen. I'm assuming they're pinching it out of the New York Central hopper cars.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
typical of a CM Schilling. It must be an uncle of yours. He's knocking off coal and selling it. So
little black market action.
A little bit of black market action. And what I do, like, if I was finishing this scene complete, to do that, and the fact that you've got the printer and I've got available printers but not here, I just design up some coal sacks and like half fill the garage with coal sacks. Stick is it Jordan, the company that makes those like A model Ford trucks and that sort of stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. Stick one of those in the front. The only other thing I'd like to throw on the roof would probably be an old spare tire, but there's just a bit of junk, on the roof, typical of what people do. So that is just about complete.
Yeah.
So,
go ahead.
Sorry, I'll just lift this. I haven't been able to get the pink foam yet. I'll have it in the next day or two. But I'll zoom this camera down. For those who wanted to build a diorama base, we talked last week about using the foam,
Right?
the insulation foam. So to give everyone an idea, so the way I do it, I think, are you using 10mm foam or 20mm foam?
I don't even think mine's that thick. Mine's very thin.
Yeah. Well, I actually think the thinner the better because you can layer it up.
That's exactly. It looks like it's probably 3/4 of the thickness of yours, but that's the whole idea for me. And I learned that from South River Model Works. All of their kits come with a big. They build all their kits and put it into a diorama and teach you how to build the diorama. But one of the things that I've never been an advocate of foam. I've always been on wood, but with this foam, I can layer 3 or 4 layers of foam and cut and carve each layer at a time. You can get very specific with it, which I like.
Yeah. Well, and it has. I've found one of the attractions to it. So that there is the 18 by 12 diorama base that we're looking at. And again, if you go back to the original plan, then we've got the road. So there's the next layer of foam. I don't know how well this is going to show up because it's wide on wide.
Right.
So therefore, the road would be here. This is the next layer of land where the houses would be sitting. And then on the back of it, up the back here, is the foam that where the the track would be. Now, whenever I'm building a diorama specifically for a diorama, I'd normally do it this way, where I have the roads and the tracks running at angles to the actual board, because I think it's more attractive to look at. It's more interesting. Whereas if you're building this to sit it into your layout, you would probably want to square everything up, because it's a lot easier to slot it in as a square with the tracks running across the thing. So basically that structure will go about there.
That's like rule number one of diorama building, by the way, guys, is never, ever, ever build a diorama on your base at right angles.
Yeah. It's just visually not attractive.
No.
And especially when you're photographing it, it means, because what most of the model diorama builders are going to do is they'll take this scene, they'll take it outside and get a natural backdrop and then photograph it. And obviously, if everything's all square, it just doesn't look right. It's not good. But what that then allows us to do is this wall here, which on my piece of foam is 10 mil high, I would be building, again, in that photo, there's a retaining wall, and it's quite a rough wooden retaining wall holding up the railroad tracks. Right. So it's just a matter of using some scale lumber or even matchsticks just to build the scale wall across the. Let me just bring that more into view. Okay.
And this is once again where our paths will differ, in the sense that I'm just going to use a store-bought diorama, pre-made, prefabbed retaining wall.
Yeah. Well, again, it comes down to the time that you have. Like, you're trying to build a 50 by 90 or whatever layout. For anyone who doesn't understand the complexity of that, apart from the model building, just the construction alone is a major undertaking.
Yeah.
So for you to spend time scratch building retaining walls, you'd never get it built.
Well, it's also one of the reasons why, for anybody that wonders, I'm building all these buildings without an actual railroad in hand.
Yep.
I'm able to put a lot of attention into these buildings that I might not otherwise put into them if I was in the midst of building the layout as well.
Yeah. And again, that's why I'm quite happy to give you all the stuff that I'm building, because I don't expect ever on this boat to have a layout. I just enjoy the build.
Yeah.
So, and it's the research and the bit that goes behind it.
It'll go to a good home and it'll be proudly displayed.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's basically how we'll build the diorama base. So if anyone who is going to build, I think James and Preston and whoever else are building, if they just get themselves some 10 millimeter, and it's extruded poly. Hang on, it's not polystyrene. It's polyurethane.
Polyurethane. Yeah.
Yeah, because the polystyrene, you can use polystyrene in scenery building under mountains and that sort of stuff, but for this sort of fine work, it's just hopeless, because the balls just break apart and make a mess. Because what we'll do is this second layer here will actually be shaved down and filed down so that it meets the road, so that there's a natural slope of the road. And then one of the things I've found, Kurt, which I'm not sure if you do or know about, but what I normally do, if I've got a structure that's going to go on a sloped surface, the great thing about this layering of the module foam up is, let's say that's the base there of the building. I can lay the base of the building on the foam before I glue it down, cut that base out so that I know that I've got a flat 10 mil surface down, like a 10 mil deep surface. Then I can build the structure and give it a 10 mil base, exactly that size, and know that it's going to be level. So then when you shave off the ground, the foam to give you the ground slope, when you sit the building back down, it's going to be level. So then it's just a matter of then dressing up the sides with whether it's dirt, grass, or brickwork. But it means that, yeah, the building sits properly. Whereas if you didn't do that, if you formed the surface of the hill then tried to set the structure on it, then you've got to try and level everything up. So it's just an easy way of getting everything level and making it look real.
Yep. Hold on one second. I'll be right back.
So when you come back to it, do you want to talk about your method of sign transfer?
Say that again.
Do you want to talk about your method of sign transferring?
Yeah. Yeah, I can go over that briefly. So let me grab an example real quick. Here's one. Oh, don't drop it. So here's a cluster of buildings that I've built. And one of the methods that I have learned, so back in the era that I'm working, for anybody that's seen this, signage was everywhere on everything. And hold on, put this somewhere it's not going to fall. And so there were multiple methods of they putting billboards on and painted on signs. So what I've done is I learned actually there is, I'll use your example. This is, I don't know why it's too bright. I can't tone it down. It's too bright to see. So anyway, this is called acrylic gesso. It's also matte. I use matte medium for mine for these. This, and what it does is basically it flattens out, or it tones down bright paint, whatnot. It's like a matte medium. But this actually stays white, which is advantageous when you're doing this. So, gosh, you know what? I'm going to have to change. Let me fix my camera here for a second. There we go. That's better. What I've done here is I put a couple signs on here that are signs that are billboards. And then this is a Wrigley's ad put on the side that I did this method with. So what you do is, and I'm actually going to do an example of it next week. You take your matte medium. Let me see. I have a big bottle of it around here. It looks like this, but it just says matte medium on it. And you brush the entire layer of where you're going to put the sign. On the computer, I found there's 1,000 pages of it on the internet of signs, date, era specific signs. And I found I literally have hundreds of pages. And this is what they look like. They're all reverse printed. So what I'll do is, this is tracing paper. So what I'll do is I'll take the signs and I'll invert them and I'll print them out on tracing paper like this. So then what I've done is I put the matte medium down and I let it dry. I also put a layer of matte medium on the piece of paper as well and let both dry. And when they're both dry, I will then put a fresh layer on here and a fresh layer on the sign, and I'll put it on here, and that's probably the most important phase of putting it on, is that application period. And you go down and you make sure there's no bubbles. Take your time. And I also, one thing I would tell you is when you're doing it, cut the sign as exact. You don't want any extra around the edges. So I have an RCA, I have a male pouch beech nut tobacco, and then a male pouch tobacco sign here. And what you do is you matte medium the second level, the second layer, you put it on, and then you apply it, you get the bubbles out, and you literally, it's 90 minutes to 2 hours is how long I'll let it dry. And then what you do is you take a very rough, and I have brushes specifically for this exercise. And here it is. I take a very, you can buy these in bulk. And I cut the bristles down to the bottom. You can see how small it is. So they're very stiff. Take a glass of water and you dip it in the water and you just start rubbing very, very hard across this. Now, what happens is, to understand, when you print something on paper, I didn't know this, white is not actually ink. White prints as transparent. So that's why you need to put a color background on whatever it is you're doing. And it actually makes it look better too. But you take this brush and you brush it very, very hard. And eventually what starts happening is the tracing paper starts to wipe away. And the only thing left is the ink on the brick. And you clean it off, and and I don't know if you can't really see it very well, but these signs have I can see all of the brick texture behind them. So they look as if they were painted on the brick. And it's a really cool method to get some really unique stuff done. You can tell the difference between the signs themselves and the painted on ones. And a lot of times you'll notice on this one, there's black trim and then yellow. What they would do is a company would come in behind, they'd buy the space. They'd just paint over the color that was there before and throw their sign and paint their sign on top of that, leaving. So third or fourth generation signs might have 3 or 4 different colors in the background. But this is an apartment building. It's actually a flower shop named after a local lady who has a flower shop here. But it's also got apartments up top of the building, which was very common back then as well. And so it was a building ripe for advertising space. You can see I put ivy growing on the back of the building as well. But all of these things date your diorama. Without one of the things about a diorama that I find to be very telling is the description plate. If you don't really need one, then you've made a good diorama, because everybody can tell when, where, and what you're making and what you've made. If you do need one, well, you're doing something historical or not. But you could look at this building right away and tell this was not a building. This is not a modern building. And that is the objective. If you see, so that's that. This is a fire station that I did for one of my city fire stations. And you can see there's a Smokey the Bear painted on. And then there's a sign down here that needs to be muted. But every chance I get, I'm doing a World War II era diorama. I do World War II era poster. So this is a war bonds poster that was painted on with the method I just told you about. This building is actually fully lit. And it's... So anyway, that's... and then there's I have another building here that I put a big Coca-Cola sign on the side. And then here's where you can see I screwed up. So if you see this side, the signs on this side, I put no color behind them. And I should, generally what you want to do, like this Planters Peanut sign, I should have put a yellow base behind it. But the white washes away and it's literally faded. These look faded, which is fine. And I've come to realize you can do this on wooden structures too. You just have to be a little bit more careful in the end process when you're scraping everything away. Well,
that's exactly the reason I asked you about that. That's exactly what I've done. With this sign on the side. Now, I purposely didn't put white underneath it because I wanted it to be like that. The Shillings had painted the sign on the side of the wood when it was whitewashed, and whitewash just bleeds away, and it just leaves the black with a little bit of the white. I actually wish I had a little bit more white underneath, but I think it still looks fine. There's a whole group of people, who just model what they call ghost signs, which are what you were talking about, where one advertiser will come and paint over the top of one, and then another.
Right.
Then, over time, we've gone to digital media and that sort of stuff, and these signs now you can travel around historical sites and you'll actually see where there's like 4 or 5 different signs all bleeding through on each other. You can almost make them out. They're pretty good. But I did some test pieces using your style of method, although I was using, I started using the gesso initially. So that, now these are going to be back to front because I didn't worry about, these were just old signs I had, so I just were using them as test pieces. So this one these are just tongue depressors. So that was put down on the gesso. One of the things you might want to try, Kurt, when you're working on wood, if you use the white gesso, you can, all I did was I didn't prepare the wood, apart from weathering it, I weathered that. I painted the white gesso straight to the back quite thickly onto the paper sign, and I'm just using regular print paper with a laser print, put the gesso onto it, stuck the sign down onto the wood, and then as soon as it was down, I used one of those makeup sponges, which are like this. So I took the makeup sponge with a bit of water, went straight over the top, and what it did was cleaned off all of the gesso except for that was underneath the
oh, nice.
The so it means that you don't have to sort of try and line up and get your sign exactly.
Right. That's actually that's good to know. That'll make it it'll make it look better too.
Yeah, well, you can see it. I'll just hold that there. You can see those signs have come up normal. Like, unfortunately, the wood is quite light behind it. But then what I then experimented with was using instead of the gesso, just the matte varnish, which is probably exactly the same as your matte medium. Okay, and then I did it exactly the same way. I've weathered that tongue depressor, then I've sponged on a little bit of antique white paint to give it that painted peel feel. And then I just put the matte varnish straight to the back of the sign, stuck the sign down, and I didn't leave it for that long. I only left it for about 10 minutes.
That actually looks really good. That looks really weathered too.
Yeah. And then what I did, I didn't realize you were using a paintbrush. I just licked my finger, started rubbing the paper, and the paper just started to roll up, and it just rolled off. Now, if you go too far and scrub too hard, which I purposely did with this one, you then start to take some of the black off.
Right.
And that's, depending on what sort of sign you're trying to do, that can be beneficial too. If it's a deteriorated sign.
Well, it's one of those things where, you can almost I say this as a modeler who's built stuff. It's very hard to over weather something, but you certainly can. But if you're doing this method like we're talking about, and you're working in one section at a time, don't worry about pulling paint, because again, the best teacher in the world is the real world.
Yeah.
Going out and looking, just look at a roof, look at a sign. They're short of the minute after they're done painting a sign, that's the last second it's ever not chipped or weathered or stained.
Yeah. And it's the same with the rolling stock, the vehicles, the people, the whole lot. It's all going to be the same. Then the only thing that I then do, like on the side here, I've got that Rinso sign. So I scaled that to be I think it's 4 foot by 6 foot. So it's like a sheet of enamel, like an enamel sign. So what I'll do, and I'll do it now, is I'll take a really good sharp HB pencil, and in the corner of each part of the sign, I'll just put it on and give it a twist and push in. And then probably in the middle as well, like that. So there's 6 like lead pencil black dots. Now, what the lead pencil does, the great part about that, is it gives me you can't see it. The naked eye won't see it directly unless you're about 10 years old and you've got good eyes. But it leaves like a slightly silver mark on the dot. And when it's photographed, it looks exactly like someone's put a nail through it.
Oh.
So then once I've got those 6, I'll then get either some like burnt umber or raw sienna on a really fine brush, something like that, a real nice fine tip brush, and then just drag down a little bit of burnt umber wash, which will just be like a rust streak coming off, and then I'll also rust streak that. And then when it's wet, I'll get some chalk pastel of the same color or a darker brown, and then just rub that in, and that'll give it a little bit of. The good thing about the pastel chalks is they give it a little bit of texture on the sign, right, so it actually looks like it's rusted once it's dried off. And then when it's all finished, I normally get a little bit of white or grey, mix it up as a wash, an acrylic, and then just wash everything with a grey wash. And what that tends to do is, at present, that sign is quite shiny.
Yeah.
And in real life, if it's rusted, it won't be. So I'll just take the shine right off that with a white wash or grey wash over the top of the building, and it'll just highlight some of the nail holes and all that sort of stuff. The other thing I didn't do on this sign, which I probably should have, but it's fairly small, is just taken what we've talked about last week, a small piece of sponge, and just used a little bit of burnt umber and just very lightly touched the outer edges, and that'll just give you the rust spots that'll make it look like a steel sign, and it comes up really quite good.
So I don't know if you've ever seen these, but these are a military modeling thing, but you can buy where is it? I have one here somewhere. You can buy, basically it's a silvered metallic pencil, and they, yeah, and you basically, what you do is you run it along the edges of something, and it gives it that worn steel edge look.
Yeah. Well, actually, that was one of the other things I was going to say. If anyone's putting, like Preston or James or whoever is building those, you can download those signs that I've used on this on the website. If you just hit the download, it'll give you a PDF, and you can print them, and they'll be at size for the building. When you're putting them on, as Kurt just said, if you've got one of the metallic pencils, you can use a pencil on the edge. But let me just get a piece of sign. Hang on. Here's a whole group. But what I normally do, I don't have one of those pencils. I'll go again to the acrylic paints and just get a very dry brush, turn the sign upside down, and then paint along the back edge with a brown or a black. You can use Sharpies to do the same thing, but I've found the problem with the Sharpie is they tend to bleed through the paper.
Yeah.
Whereas just a dry brush, all you're trying to do is get rid of any white. You don't want white anywhere on the model, because in reality it's just not there. And as soon as you look at it and you can see the white, it takes the viewer's eye away from it, and it's a piece of paper. Whereas when you've spent so much time to get as much realism into a building as you possibly can, the last thing you want to do is then destroy it with a sign.
Actually, here it is right here. So this is what it's a woodless pencil. It's graphite.
Yep.
And basically, you just run it along the edge of something like this, and it leaves a steel worn edge. Takes about 2 seconds to do too, but for armor modeling, it's like indispensable.
So the other thing I've done is I've designed up the outhouse. So I'll build that this week. It'll only take, in fact, I'll probably build it later on tonight. It'll only take a few minutes because it's so small. It's basically, I think now, 15 millimeters square. So it is quite small. What I intend to do is build it out of just this black cardstock, And again, this is just one of my tips. I never try to use, when I'm using cardstock, I always try to find, like at an art supply, this sort of card where it's the color all the way through. It's not, when you cut it, you can't see the cardboard, for want of a better term. So it means that if you ever have an edge showing, you're not seeing paper, you're seeing just a black color. But what I intend to do is I'll put a PDF of the design on the website. So again, Preston and James, you can download that. But we'll cut it out of cardstock, build it up. I'll probably brace it with like I've got some of this, which is just those tongue depressors cut down square, and I'll just glue those in to brace the corners to give me something to glue. But it's fairly fine structure. And then I'll use, I've got to debate whether I use the Matchbox wood, or I've also got this, which is just straight veneer that you would find at any, I'm assuming Lowe's or Walmart or any hardware store will have just veneer wood. And if you can find, you can buy, I'm sure you can buy this for modelling purposes. But this would just be used by a cabinet maker to dress the edges of a cabinet when they're doing it. So it's only about probably 0.5 millimetre thick. What I look for is a very fine grained wood. So I can trim this down to, because the boards on that outhouse, when you scale them, they're about 3 inches wide. So, or call it 4 inches. Like that's a third of 3.5 millimeters. So they're only going to be,
you're talking about scale inches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're only going to be about a millimeter, 1.2 millimeters, I think it works out at. I'll put that on the plan. So you'll need to strip down some wood like this to 1.2 millimeters and then just glue it to the side. I was going to model it with an open door, but I think I'll do it exactly as a diorama. Close the door, because it really, it's part of the highlight of the diorama, where the clothesline is running across the outhouse, and the door is shut. So you just want to try and get it as solid as possible. And it's the difficulty of modelling in this. I actually mentioned to Jason Jensen, who is a very good modeler. I was talking to him the other day, or sending him a message, and he's currently working on a G scale layout.
Oh, really?
And for anyone, again, we have Z gauge, N gauge, which is half the size of HO. HO actually stands for half of O gauge, so that's 7 millimeters to the foot. Then you've got S gauge and a few other gauges. If you get up to G gauge, and you're starting to look at, like, a locomotive can actually be operated by steam at that size, so it's really big. But as I said to him, it was last night, that how good it'd be, and it's the reason he's doing it, is just a break from HO modelling, where when you want to get detailed, you can get right down into the detail. At G scale, a 1 inch object in real life can actually be modelled, whereas in HO it can't be. It's just too fine. So, but it's an interesting thing he's doing. He's building it's something, I don't know whether it's a gamer's thing or not, but it's a steampunk railroad with sort of like, it's got Star Wars characters and a lot of very interesting stuff. I won't say that it doesn't interest me. What interests me is the techniques and methods he's using, especially his rust techniques. He's very good, but he's using a lot of, and I think you've got some of the MIG product, and Ammo and all those companies, which make life very easy. Yeah,
well, and MIG, he has a lot of his, so MIG, Ammo is MIG. What he does is, it's a little pricey, but he builds paint sets for specific things. Like he
Yes.
has, well, there you go. This is Life Color, but this is a whole box of paints dedicated to weathering rail. Nothing else. And so, and Mig does that Mig actually creates paint sets for era-specific vehicles. Like he's got early war German armor camo. He's got late war base color, whatever. And he's actually, I don't know, he's kind of fallen off a little bit, but about a year or two ago, he started getting into model railroading quite a bit. And he started putting out some stuff for model railroading, and all of it was just top notch.
I think he's South American, Argentinian, or something like that.
He is Europe, Portugal, Spain. I think
Portugal. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. There's a whole group of modelers down. Well, the reason I had this feeling that he may have been South American is there's a whole group of modelers down south that they're diorama builders, and some of their work is it's just really great. It's all museum quality stuff.
Yeah. The only,
and a lot of them are, sorry.
I was going to say the only people I think that are better than the Brazilian and South American guys are the Asian modelers. The Japanese guys take it to a whole new level. I mean, they'll spend 6 months to 8 months building a vehicle because they're rivet counter. No, they are, and there are, when it comes to model railroading, they tend to be engaged modelers because of Kato. They do a lot of that, and like I found out it's also because if you look at just lifestyle, Japanese while the Asian home is not like the American home. They're very restricted on their square footage in a lot of ways.
Yeah, they specialize when it comes to model railroads. A lot of them specialize in micro, what they call micro layouts, where this 18 by 12 diorama, they would have a whole model railroad scene.
Yeah, they'll do Z gauge.
Yeah, but it's interesting also. This is model railroading related, but some of the best steam engines that were ever built came from Japan and Korea. The brass is just phenomenal, the work that they did.
Well, I still think, for my money, Shinohara was the best track company that ever made track.
Did they? Because I haven't been sort of active model railroading, are they still available?
Yes, they are still available, but I think they were bought by somebody.
Yeah, I used to use their code because they were when I was, the last layout I did was 15 years ago, and the Shinohara code 70 was like the bee's knees of model railroad.
Still is the gold standard.
Yeah, mind you, everyone seems to have gone to fast track now, so that's a good. That's if they're like.
Yeah, I think there's just a huge interest in laying your own track, and fast track has made it very, very easy and doable for someone that wants to do that.
Well, this all comes down to technology, and this week has been technologically difficult for you with that printer, but eventually, all of us will have printer. I obviously can't have one. A level surface on a boat is only level as long as no one drives past the boat. So I can't use a printer on the boat.
Yeah, I never thought of it like that, actually.
But the printers are small enough now that I can actually use one.
Right.
Except for the fact that it'll probably zero out all the time because it'll go, oh, hang on, I'm off level. Especially yesterday, we had some fairly large winds blowing. It was almost like the back end of a typhoon, although it's not typhoon season. But we had winds coming from the southeast, which tended to blow out.
I tend to frown on living anywhere where typhoons have a season.
So do we, and so does our insurance company.
I would imagine.
Yeah. Well, to a point where we have to self-insure while we're here. We can't get insurance.
I was going to say, yeah.
Well, not unless I wanted to spend the cost of the boat every year just to insure it. We copped $40,000 worth of damage in Japan during a typhoon.
Oh, really?
and that was just, we just had to, we budget for that. We have a plan that, should if we cop damage and we can't get insurance, well, we're just going to have to pay for it. But actually, that damage come close to a point where Wendy and I have spoken about it often. I actually said to her, it's time. If the next time we hit this dock, you can just jump off and leave the boat. It was that bad. But that's something totally different to modelling. The great thing about COVID, I suppose, is the fact that I've been able to spend a year getting back into my roots at Hobbies.
Yeah, no, it's I've enjoyed this. It's been
so for the next structure, Kurt. Do you want a scratch build, or do you want to build one of those plastic two-story homes?
I'm not sure yet. I'm gonna take stock. I'm gonna be heading to Tennessee. Well, I have this this charity hockey tournament coming up this weekend for this young man, and then the week after, I'm heading to Tennessee.
Yep.
To get started on the train room, or as my wife says, to get a new home. But my priority lies. Yeah.
Everyone needs a train room.
Everyone needs a train room.
Yeah.
I've never heard my wife say.
That's also something I've never heard Wendy say. We spoke about it earlier. With Japan, like they're so limited on their size, the space in their homes. It's the same all over the world. American modelers, especially sort of not so far as West Coast modelers, but Midwest to East Coast modelers, most homes have got a basement. So basement railroading becomes a thing. In Australia, virtually no house has got a basement.
Really?
It's not how we build homes. In fact, all modern homes are just built straight onto a concrete slab. Right. So most of the modelers there are building garages at the back of their home. So they've got a garage or something.
Oh, really?
Or a spare bedroom for the smaller layouts. And then in the UK, I know a couple of modelers from the UK, and they're at the other end of the scale. They're up in their attics. They don't have basements as such, but the UK older homes tend to be a lot smaller. And it was always one of the things as a young modeler that I used to envy. Like, it was almost like basement envy. You go, man, like the room that an American modeler has. Whereas it's a fairly large investment for an Australian modeler to build a 20 by 30 foot structure just to put a layout into.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's why you've seen so many creative entries in the model railroad space for layouts is that, you generally, few people are lucky enough to just say, I'm going to put it in this room. They have to kind of build a railroad around the room.
Yeah. And then the thing that's popular in Australia is obviously club layouts.
Yeah.
Although with any club, it then becomes a political thing.
Yeah.
And I'm not suggesting as in
as does everything.
Sorry.
As does everything.
Yeah, and it becomes difficult. But I was a member of a number of clubs, and they were always a little bit of fun, but they eventually wear you down. But the module thing, I think in America, it's especially on the West Coast, it's very popular with Fremo modeling.
No, the N gauge is the bee's knees of modules. Yeah.
But there's also quite an active group in the Pacific Northwest of ON30 module clubs.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That ON30 is a scale that we've talked about before, but that gives you all of the fineness of a HO model, or so I shouldn't say fine, but space-wise you can fit a lot more in because the track size is so small. But you end up with quite a good modelling size at O gauge.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier. So what I'll plan on doing, I think, next week.
Hey, James asked if we could pick a new model that you can order for the future for a future class. I'm thinking that Walter's house.
Yep.
Do you want to link that?
Yeah, I will. I'll put it onto that. I haven't got the link right here. I've actually got a photo of it on. There's two or three of them. They're a plastic model, which will give you, if you can talk to that more than I will.
Right.
I'll sort of continue on scratch building using clapboard, but the Walters 2-story, I think they call them company houses.
Yeah.
They're virtually the same footprint as the homes that are across the road, which I intend to build next, I think, because I can do the 4-walled structure for the top fairly quickly, and then start concentrating on this method of casting with hydrocal the big bases. And I think I'm actually sort of looking forward to it. Well, I'll use this this foam. I don't know whether it's a foam PVC, I think, but it's what Doug used for the seawall. So I'd suggest for anyone who wants to give it a go, it'll be a bit interesting, for want of a better term, but because what I'll do is cut the windows in this foam and set them onto the base of the mould, so that when we pour the plaster in, when you take the plaster out, you actually have all of your windows in there ready or the window openings are ready to go.
That's rather smart.
Yeah, as I said, I was quite impressed with Doug's method of doing it. I've also looked at a couple of other things. One of the reason I was able to get onto the dental plaster is because we have a good friend here who's a Korean dentist. They also have another thing that I've never heard of until yesterday, which is the powder that they mix with water to make the mold when they're taking a mold of someone's mouth to do reconstructive, like whether it's implants or false teeth and that sort of thing. It's called Algamate, I think.
Alchemite?
And yeah, and it's very here it's actually a very cheap product, and it's basically just a 1-part mix. You mix the powder in with the water, it sets up in about 5 minutes, and it molds things extremely detailed. So some craft people, do things like they'll mix up the powder into a plastic soft drink bottle, and then force their hand into it, leave their hand there for about 2 minutes, and then pull their hand out, and then they come out with a perfect mold of their hand, so they can pour the mold in plaster or whatever. Yeah, so I'll have a play with that as well, because for the garage build, there's a number of ways that we can. I haven't put a base like the concrete slab yet. I've made up a couple in different methods. This one is craft foam, and you can see some of the cuts in that, and that's fairly easy, but it's not a bad texture, but I think it looks a little bit model-like. Then I also did one here for that original mock-up, which was cardstock with the gesso over the top, and then stained that with a bit of Indian ink, and it gave me the impression of a concrete slab. But I think what I'll do once we've started casting a bit of plaster, I'll actually cast a slab underneath, the right size for this structure, and then again in the photo there's a tapered driveway coming up into the front of the garage, so that'll all be cast, and then we can spend one of our sessions on obviously using inks and stains and getting a real concrete look to structures, well, not just structures, but roads, and because that sort of leads us to the road down the front. Although on the road in that diorama, it's actually covered in grass. So it was just a dirt track.
Oh, okay.
And I'll probably model it that way. The other thing I can do, Kurt, I know you've got a static grass applicator.
Yeah.
I've got all the pieces here to build my own static grass applicator.
Imagine that.
And I can show people how to do that and where to get the parts. Most of those static grass applicators, unless you buy the really good ones from Europe, they're a bit underpowered.
Yeah.
They tend not to.
Absolutely true.
So what I did a bit, because I have a bit of a background in electronics. I researched it, and out of China, I was able to get the ionizing module, but the one I've got will take 12 volts and turn it into 40,000 volts. So basically, it'll stand up not only the grass, but the hairs on your head and everything else around.
Everybody else in port.
Sorry?
Everybody else in port.
Yeah, I'll stand Mars and God knows what. But the good thing about it is it's all quite cheap. I think the module itself was about $6 to buy, and then really all we're looking at is a mesh cover in a like a Tupperware type dish with a handle, hook it all up, and then we can get. And I was able to find some static grass again from China on AliExpress. So I ordered that last week so that I can do this up, which will probably bring me to the last thing I was going to talk about today is deciding on not only period but season.
Oh yeah,
it's an important thing. I've always enjoyed, because my modeling in the past was the Feather River Canyon in California,
right,
the Western Pacific. And Wendy and I visited there a couple of times when we lived in Seattle, but also when we visited when we had our advertising company. I drove her nuts. We went rail fanning down the Feather River Canyon from Reno. But that was every time we were there. It was always in winter, and it was just absolutely stunning. All the big Douglas fir trees and that all covered in snow, and the tracks covered in snow, and quite often snow plows and all that sort of stuff operating through the canyon. So that was how I've modelled in the past. So with this diorama, it was set in January of 1939. So I'll intend to do that as a winter scape. So instead of green grasses and those sort of things, everything will be straw brown,
right,
and dead. But it's one of those things for a modeler. If you, depending on what you want to depict, you can do it quite accurately. And winter is a great time to model because you don't have to worry too much about trees apart from bare structures, because obviously all the deciduous trees have lost their leaves. Right. So it just makes it easy to model.
Yeah. No, I've noticed as I've been researching model railroads, one of the things that I never really realized was model railroaders, some of them will literally pick specific days of the year.
Yeah.
Because they're so intent on modeling a specific season and a specific look. And it's pretty cool. I mean, winter is probably the least modeled season in any endeavor, just because it's such a challenge to, no one wants to, making models snow is not actually fun.
Well, actually, I disagree with you there.
Then you're a masochist.
No, I developed a couple of ways purely because it was just necessity. You've seen the video I did for the Christmas tree farm layer that runs around our daughter's Christmas tree. Yeah. That I built that whole layout in 2 weeks with Terry, and we just used a rattle can of matte white,
right,
dusting onto the trees, and then the snow I used baking soda.
Yeah, which is fine. The problem is that if you're building a layout, though, baking soda eventually turns brown.
Well, that's what we thought, and I don't know what we've done that was right, but 12 months on, Jesse and Terry grabbed that out this year, and none of it had gone brown. It had all stayed, and it was just stored on its side in their garage, so it was not sort of well, they looked after it reasonably well, but yeah, and we pulled it out and stayed white. So I was quite impressed with that. But I used baking soda, acrylic corking to give the bulk for the snow.
Right.
And then it's probably because I sprayed it down with a matte white rattle can that it's just stayed white.
Yeah, that might be the reason.
Yeah.
So for James, there's a post on the post on Gary's blog. There's a post of the Walthers models for the company housing.
Yeah, I'll grab a link to it. I think I found it on. Is it called Train Stuff or?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your preferred supplier, Kurt?
For
models and like plastic models?
Gary, it depends on what I'm looking for. I mean, I'll tell you, my preferred supplier is the internet.
Yeah. Well, that's
I mean,
mine.
I can find you can find a specific building for anything now, and so for my railroad, it's been I've gone to some of the high end craftsman's kits for the major industries on the coaling and the sawmill. I mean, I don't even want to tell you what it cost me to buy. There's a twin. I want to say it's South River Model Works, but it's a twin. It's a dual blade lumber sawmill.
Yeah,
and it's a huge. Well, I think I have it somewhere here. I want to show you for one reason, because I spent a ridiculously stupid amount of money to buy this kit that was out of print. Well, not out of print, but it was limited run. And I bought the No Frills edition. Well, on little tiny print at the bottom of the No Frills edition page, it doesn't include the wood that comes with the kit. It's like 40 pages of master plans to create this thing. And the wood to make this kit was $270.
Wow. Actually, one of the things I found on the internet this week, I know I never realised, since George has retired, there's a company that is now producing all of his die-cast detail parts, and fairly
From Kurt's iPhone.
Sorry about that.
Which is good, because I really want to put a wood workshop together. I've done the structure, but I need to do the interior. I noticed that they've got a kit for it. It's about $30 for the die cast. I've designed some of them up for Terry to print.
Gary, if you go on eBay, one of the products that you can find literally thousands of are boxes of fine scale miniature metal castings. And the only reason I say that is because the guy that sells them goes in and cleans them and shines them and sands them clean, so they're literally ready to paint when you get them. Yeah, and they're relatively cheap.
Yeah, I think the kit that I saw was for a wood workshop, so it had like a wooden lathe, a bandsaw, a circular saw, a planer, and all that sort of stuff. And I think it worked out at about $30, which sounds expensive, but for what it is, there was about 40 pieces in the kit. So that's quite good value. But we want, I've designed up what's called a ship's bandsaw, which is a bandsaw that they use when they're planking the side of a wooden sailing ship. They use it to cut the angles on the planks. So I've designed that in 3D so that when I get home, I'd probably get Terry to print that up. But what I did notice, what was interesting, we were happy with those the white metal castings,
right?
Up until someone invented the digital printer. Now we expect the detail to be so fine. We're not willing to accept the old.
So this is going to be one of the two focal industries on my railroad, which is a sawmill, and this is twin mills. So let me see if I can show you. This is a picture of the finished model.
Yep.
Okay. So I bought this thing, and it came, and I'm like, wow, there's not a lot of wood in here, because that just seems like it needs a lot more. But here is the layout for the diorama.
Yep.
All right. And it's literally page upon page of plans to build everything. Everything's done to scale. Gorgeous stuff. Here is the box of wood I had to buy to build this thing.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, and
that's almost a scam. You would expect it to buy a kit.
Listen, I do not like to make people feel bad. Look at the wood.
Wow.
So, but I wrote him a letter, and in the letter I said, and I know the guy bought a ton of stuff. He makes quality kits, but I said, I'm going to tell you right now. I said, and only because my kids aren't going to go hungry because I had to buy this kit, but the kit's going to ended up costing me close to $700 with the wood. And I said, you know what? It's a bullshit way to do business. And he knew exactly what he was doing when he made the product page, because you don't see wood not included. He just says no frills. I don't know. I've never assumed to buying a wood kit that it would come without the wood. I've never heard of that in my life.
Yeah, that's like a ship kit coming without the hull.
It's exactly right. And so I said, listen, I'm going to support your product. I'm going to pay for it and all the things that I'm a customer. I said, but I will never buy another product from you. And I think it's a bullshit way to do business. And I honestly think that you need to put on the product website, all of the things and he was like apologetic. And here's the thing. I want to support businesses. I'm like, it's not an easy thing to do. I get that, but there's no reason to do something like that. None.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, his castings, he does all of his this box is just packed. His castings are absolutely gorgeous. They're the resin castings.
Yeah.
It's a Sierra West kit.
Yeah. And it's where I think that he lets himself down. I've looked at Sierra West, and I'd now be sort of hesitant to buy. Well, most of the stuff I'm doing is scratch building anyway. But even so, I'd be hesitant to buy his stuff, knowing that he's done that, because I don't know, it's not right.
Well, we're a very tight knit group. As nerdy as that sounds, as hobbyists, we're a very tight knit group. We're a pretty honest group of people. We have the same hobby. We like to help each other. All the things that go with that. You don't have to. Limited edition. I was talking to George about doing a couple of kits, and I said, he's like, the hobby's really, it's really not that, active. I said, listen, you make a limited edition 250 run kit, you'll sell every single one.
Yeah. Well, that's why, you and I sort of joked about get together and we'll design something up and produce it. And I'm sure we can, but if I produce something, I want it so that when the builder builds it, wants to become a friend, not a foe.
Right. Exactly right. Well, and that's the thing is I bought a lot of George's kits because I knew what I was going to get when I opened the box.
Yeah. And
here is actually, and like I said, Brett is. I've never known Brett not to be an honest, nice guy, but I just thought it was a chicken shit thing to do. The other thing is, this is actually, this is the railroad camp that's going to go next to the logging industry.
Yeah.
The sawmill. And so, yeah, but I got to tell you one last thing before we go. I built the first Sierra West kit I built is over there. his weathering method, although it's probably the hardest thing I've done, is by far, hands down, the best weathering method for wood that I've ever done in my life. And he walks you through in the book. What you basically do is you soak his wood in water. So you make a water with India ink, and basically you take each sub-construction in its own bag, you put it in its own container, and you soak it for 24 hours, and then you dry it in the microwave. It is by far and away the best looking model I've ever done, wood model I've ever done. Because all of the wood dries, it comes out gray.
Yeah.
But no two board. If you put 1,000 boards in there, not one of them will be the same color as the other one. It looks absolutely fantastic. It's just and I'm going to do it. I've kind of gotten to a point where I've just gotten sloppy enough in my model room that I'm like almost enclosed. I don't have the desk space just because I'm so freaking sloppy about this stuff. But that's the best.
I have to be a little bit limited,
Yeah.
As you saw, the decks. This is the desk space.
Well, I promise you, if Shonda had to live in my model room like Wendy has to live in yours, I wouldn't look like this.
Yeah, true. Just to mention, James, I've put that link to the page that has the structures, just if you want to check it to make sure it's the same ones.
So we're done. Hey, we're done for the night, guys. Gary, I wanted to show you. I did a second printing.
Yeah. And
it's clear to me that one of the things that became obvious, the second printing actually came out better than the first, way better than the first. And it did thin down a little bit. But one of the issues is I realized this. So when I looked at the model, the crane house actually has the crane attached to it. So this thing had to build support for the crane, which is why I've got a lot of this plastic in here. But I'm gonna cut this apart and see, because this came out really, really nice.
Yeah. Well, Terry, that offer from Terry, I spoke to him last night. I think we talk every day to our kids. So, and he said that he's downloaded the Dremel software.
Okay.
So if you want to send him anything, he might have a look at it, make sure the supports are set up properly.
You know what I would like to do is to send him a couple files and have him print them out on my printer. Because he can remotely control my printer.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Well, actually, is Terry still there? I noticed he made a comment earlier. If not, I'll talk to him about that. You can do that. Also, he's got a couple of files that he'll send you for.
He doesn't have to send them to me. I can just give him access to my printer, and he can print them from his computer.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure if he's looked at the software, he now knows that. But this came out like I would like to. I'm gonna see. I almost feel like it's going to be as much work building the model as it is cutting it out. But if it works well, I'd like to have 2 or 3 of these in the shipyard.
Overhead cranes.
Yep.
And they're a period thing?
Say it again.
They're a period crane?
Yes. Yeah, they're from the shipyards, actually. It's a shipyard crane.
That'll be quite good. I got just off on the other subject, you're designing your layout. I had a look at, I've got to think of the name of it, the Morgan, I think it is, one of the Liberty ships. If you do a Google search on Liberty ships, it comes up because it's actually a museum, and there's quite a lot of plans for the ship itself online. Mm-hmm. And so I took those plans and drew them out to scale in HO scale, and then laid them in the basic plan that I was doing for the harbour scene. And it can be done, but we may need a little bit more than 9 foot because just to get the track up alongside a Liberty ship.
Yeah, the space that I'm allotting is about, I think it's 4 feet wide and 12 feet deep all the way to the end. But the main line's got to run along part of that 12 feet. But I'll have more than enough room. My guess is that the one I'm looking at, they're about 310 feet long, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
which I think comes out to somewhere between 5 and 6 feet HO scale.
Yeah. I think from memory, the ship that I looked at was a little bit less than 300 foot.
Right.
It was still quite a big ship. So it worked out a pretty good size for HO. I spoke to my ex-Navy friend in Australia. And I tried to convince him that he should start building you one, but he said, because he does a lot of work on commission.
Right.
But he said the biggest problem with the detail that he models at, it's almost he'll do it in Australia for an Australian, but to try and send it overseas, he's just worried.
Yeah. I'm gonna make it. It's gonna be a waterline model. So my biggest challenge will be figuring out and getting a piece of wood big enough to shape the hull.
Yeah. I think if you shape up the hull in wood and then probably laminate styrene to the side to give you that plate structure, it'll come up quite good.
Well, I mean, is that not the beauty of the printer? I can print out a sheet of metal plating.
Yeah.
Highly detailed.
It's not too unrealistic to think that instead of shaping up a piece of timber, you can't design up the ship and do it in modules and glue them together to get the 5 foot or 4 foot or whatever it happens to be, just section the ship across. Because all of the plans for those sort of ships, that's exactly how they were built.
Right. My biggest concern is I don't think the printer bed is wide enough. I'm not sure how wide the ship is going to be, but I'm pretty sure it's not going to be wide enough. Now, I could do each section in 2 parts, so I could do however many sections, but I could do them in halves and just put the halves together because I'm going to cover it all anyway. Or actually, if I did that, I could just print the detail right on the model.
Yeah, that's right. That's what I'm thinking. Well, even if you break it down to still carve a piece of wood or have it carved to the basic shape of the hull, and then print the planks or the plates of the side to detail with portholes and all that sort of stuff. And you'd only have to do them in 6-inch sections and then glue them and stick them to the side of the wood. The wood will hold the structure, and then you'll be able to do the jigs and the superstructure.
All right. Hey, Gary, it's always a pleasure, my friend.
Yep. I think I've got to go grocery shopping again. Wendy's down the back.
All right, so I'll let you know the package too. Should be heading your way.
Oh yeah, thanks for that, Kurt. It'll be what I'll do is because I think you said you threw in a handful of titchy windows.
Oh yeah, I put a whole bag full of them in there for you.
Okay, so what I'll do, I think you said the windows tend to be 10 by 20, the hole cut out.
Okay.
So what I'll do is cut the clapboard for this next structure with 10 by 20 windows, and it'll just make it easy. So if anyone wants to build along, they'll be able to just buy some clapboard at about $4 for a sheet, and from a $4 strip of clapboard, you can virtually build at least 2 houses for $4 plus window.
I'm actually going to I'm sure I've got something around here that I can make into a company house. So, all right. I'll talk to you, G. Take care of yourself, brother.
I'll just quickly post a link. Hang on, I'm just now to the page that I put up last night, which has the photos of this structure, and you'll be able to see that a little bit better detail. Okay. And it's also got the PDFs for anyone who wants to download CM Schilling and Sons, General Coal Merchants. And okay, then, Kurt, you have a great night, and I'll
take care. Bye, Wendy.
She's down the back somewhere. Should say hi, and I'll. Hey, there was a. Did you hear that?
I got it. I'll talk.